Okay, welcome. We're now going to be looking at the A-star mark scheme and responses for the poetry paper in language. So this is paper 2, section A. Now, you'll notice straight away that this is the mark scheme, and we have skills descriptors and content descriptors. Now, the content descriptors will actually change year on year depending on what the question is, because it's to do with what the examiner is expecting you to have mentioned about the poem or the one you're comparing it to, etc. Now, with the skills descriptors, they build from 1921 here, so that's a B and an A and an A star, but you see the mark range here for the content is basically the kind of thing a student will talk about, whether a B or an A star student. So the kind of thing you'll talk about is the same, but the level of detail that you'll go into is different. Now, if you've noticed any of the other poem analysis videos, I've actually gone through them all with a certain format called SMILE: structure, meaning, image, language, and effect. And the reason I actually highlight those things is because that's all of the areas that you need to mention to get the highest grades. So consistent insight and convincing and imaginative interpretation. So basically, all the way through your piece, you are showing clear and perceptive detail, and you've got a very convincing argument, so it sounds like you definitely know what you're talking about, and it's imaginative, so you might actually come up with an original take. So an A star, you're really expecting an original take on something. A conceptualized comparative response. Conceptualized in this aspect, basically just means you're actually accounting for everything, and the comparative obviously just means that the whole way through you're comparing everything possible in both poems. There's no point actually picking out like 6 different metaphors or 6 different similes. One on one from each poem is absolutely fine. Then you've shown you understood that technique, then move on, get another skill and another range of ideas in or down. And then you've got finally close textual analysis, and close textual analysis basically just means you are really going through the finer details. So you're not just picking out the obvious things in the poem, you're looking at through some of the fine ones. So now that we've actually just been over that briefly, we'll look at an A-star response. Now again, the A-star response that I'm going to look at is from AQA. AQA marked it themselves, and this is part of the standardization material that they give to teachers, and they're telling us this is what an A-star is. So you won't go far wrong if you do take this as a benchmark for an A-star. So here I'm going to reference some of the things from the mark scheme and also from SMILE that this student has done. I've chosen to compare 2 scavengers in a truck with nothing's changed because they offer interesting comparisons in the way language and layout are used for effect in the poems. Okay, that's a perfect introduction, doesn't waste any words, no background, no dramatic storyline, nothing unnecessary basically. So we can tell from this that they were asked to compare 2 scavengers in a truck with something, and they were asked to look at language and layout used for effect. So here, to begin with layout, both poems use their layout to reinforce the meaning of their themes. So again, the structure there is actually being a reference to support the meaning. In 2 Scavengers, the layout consists of indented lines overlapping between left and right alignment, so it's actually picked out straight away another point of structure. I feel this mimics, well chosen word, the theme of segregation between the rich and poor, touching on the theme straight away in these poems, with the left and right representing the parallel but different worlds. So that's excellent. So that really sums up that moment in the poem where they are all caught at the red light. So the parallel, they're all actually there at the same time, but very different, and that's exactly right. However, the lines also overlap in certain places, so he's actually picked this out. And here he said, however, the lines overlap. So he's actually looking at it for a second level, a slightly deeper level, which is again more conceptualized, which I think mimics the fact that there are some similarities and some common ground shared between the rich and poor, which is a great statement about society in general and also about the people that are in the poem. This is reflected in the language of the poem. So basically, he's also saying that that is supported too by the language of the poem. So you can see how he's talked about the meaning structure. Now he's talking about language. This is reflected in the language of the poem too, as the rich man and the poor garbage man are likened as they're both having sunglasses and long hair. An alternative approach to this, so here he's going for the imaginative one, alternative approach to this layout may be that perhaps the confused layout represents the fragmented nature of society, as a persona is clearly a firm believer that democracy is mere illusion and truth comes a lot of and in truth comes a lot of injustice, or carries a lot of injustice. Apologies, the print there isn't very clear. So here we've actually got an alternative view that is actually offered, and then the effect. So he's actually saying this poem actually gives us an idea that this is not, or this is what the writer wanted to get across to us. So again, it's very well noted. This is shown in the persona's concluding line of "in the high seas of this democracy," which appears sarcastic. So an analysis there. After we witnessed the the stark contrast between the rich and poor, with an elegant open Mercedes versus a bright yellow garbage truck, and casually coiffed versus grungy. So that's really, really well written. So they've actually made that inference and that constant cross-reference between one and the other, haven't led into it another way with this shows. This demonstrates it's basically just one use of this is shown, and then we've got 4 quotations that come in after it, just tennising off each other, saying this in this poem, that in that poem, this in this poem, that in that poem. So we have it here with the open elegant Mercedes, the yellow garbage truck, casually coiffed, and grungy. Just really, really quickly compared, and very accurately compared as well. This links to Nothing's Changed because so here we've actually moved across to the second poem now, so we've done quite a fair amount of opening analysis on that. We move on to Nothing's Changed. This links to Nothing's Changed because the poem also suggests that democracy is a mere illusion. So he's actually linked it there by talking about the frailty of democracy. So obviously he's highlighted that as a valid element of meaning or theme for this. The poem is written after the apartheid, so supposedly whites and blacks have equal rights. But the persona feels nothing's changed, as although no sign says it is, i.e., although officially the banner has been removed, in practice it will be there forever. Now the skill that you're actually seeing here is just embedded quotations, and that's definitely like a BA grade skill. So if you can actually just make sure that you're working that in the whole time, just picking out quotes, and it just makes it sound a lot more, it's that close analytical it's that close textual reference that you saw in the A-star piece mark scheme at the end there. No sign says it is, although officially the banner has been removed, in practice it will be there forever. Comparing Nothing's Changed layout to Two Scavengers, it shares a similarity that the layout gets across the meaning of the poem. So you'll notice that what they may be doing here as we're building through it is they've mentioned poem A, the first poem they're going to talk about, and then in the second paragraph they're saying B is similar because, or B is different because. The comparing Nothing's Changed, the layout of Scavengers, it shares similarity between the layout and gets across the meaning of the poem. The poem is written in regular 8-line stanzas, which are separated by a single line. I feel the different standards represent the whites and the blacks, and the fact that all the standards are equal in length represents the fact that whites and blacks in reality are equal. So there's a very good interpretation of the structure there, but the lines dividing the stanza represent the fact that they are ignorant of this fact and continue to live in segregation. And as you know, that poem actually has 7 stanzas, 3 one side, then a really short one, then 3 the other. So that middle one does act like a barrier indeed. The only anomaly, well-chosen word, that means oddity, to the layout and Nothing's Changed, the lines no sign says it is, but we know where we belong. Isolating these lines and breaking free from the expected structure puts emphasis on these lines and increases the effect that they have on the reader as they now comprehend that no legal or superficial declaration of equality can undo the years of social injustice and segregation. And that's really, really original, the way they've actually put that across there. So you've got that line in the middle where even though you've got this balance on 2 sides, there will always be a division. So no changing of a political system or no changing of the signage in a place will actually break that down. So that's really well noted. To an extent, Two Scavengers uses the technique as well towards the end of the poem. Ferlinghetti begins to fragment and indent his lines more frequently. So actually now they're picking out how something has changed in the structure from the beginning to the end of the poem, which is really good, particularly with the across the small gulf and the high seas of this democracy. The fragmented nature of these lines causes them to be read at a slower pace. So actually talking about how the tone has changed, and obviously this has an implication for the writer's ideas, what he's actually getting across to us there, which is actually mentioned in terms of the idea that this again is not something that you can easily overcome, the social injustice, as he mentioned earlier, or at least that's what he's referring to in this section. It gives a more sarcastic meaning of democracy, a larger impact. I feel this is a very effective way of using layout to get across the meaning of the poem. Turning to language, that's nicely introduced. Both poems use contrast to get across the concept of how distinctly different the lives of whites and blacks are in Nothing's Changed, and between the rich and poor in Two Scavengers. Closely compared again. In Nothing's Changed, the whites have new upmarket hawk cuisine, whereas the blacks have bunny chowns, a poor man's hamburger. The whites live in luxury with linen falls and single rows, whereas the blacks eat at plastic tables top. These contrasts provide stark and vivid images between their lifestyles, and these something are shown between two social classes and two scavengers. Sorry, contrasts, I believe that says. Contrasts are shown between two social classes and two scavengers. The two garbage men are described as hanging onto the garbage truck as though for dear life, representing what struggle life is for them, and are described as grungy and hunchback, whereas the rich couple are hip, coiffed and cool. The contrast is also visible in the fact that the garbage men are older in comparison to the younger cool couple. This shows how the garbage men are towards the end of their journey. In a metaphorical sense, they have no hope for the future in this unjust society, and this is shown in a literal sense by the fact that they are on their way home. That's excellent, just constant comparison between the vehicles, the characters, the situation they're in, what they're wearing, etc, 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 just constantly. So they're in what's apparently half a page. Just zoom out, see if that is half a page. Yeah, and about half a page in their actual essay response, they've actually looked through and just made about maybe 7 or 8 points, for four from each. So they've actually got really a whole load of examples there, and always explained what it actually does. However, in contrast, the young rich people are described as on the way to the architect's office, so metaphorically and literally, their journey has only just begun, as money gives them several advantages in life. However, both poems also use language for effect by using contrast to suggest subtleties in double meanings. To clarify, nothing's changed. Comparisons and contrasts can also be interpreted as showing the blacks to be better off than the whites. So here he's going for that imaginative response, the idea that this is something different, which is going for the A star really, can be interpreted as showing that the blacks are better off than the whites. And similarly, in two scavengers, the poor seem better off than the rich. And nothing's changed. The blacks can be seen as described metaphorically in the purple flowering amiable weeds, which suggest that they are beautiful people and unnecessarily discarded and unwanted, and hence classified as weeds. And if we continue this metaphor, perhaps the white symbolism is the flag name flaring at the whites inn. The subtle suggestion that the blacks are better off than the whites, in fact, because the weeds grow tall, which suggests connotations of strength and pride in what they are. So there, they've actually really analysed that section and given it a completely alternative meaning, which is very valid in what they are. Whereas the whites flag squats, which represents it has a less than enjoyable life of secrecy and avoidance, as the whites know their behaviour is corrupt. So that's actually really thorough analysis of the possibility, what the derivatives that you can actually take from the word squats in this. Similarly, in two scavengers, the poor garbage men are described as wearing red plastic blazers and yellow garbage trucks, whereas the rich are in hip 3-piece linen suit in an open Mercedes. At first glance, this would suggest that the rich have lavish vehicles and more sophisticated clothing, but in a second look, it suggests otherwise. The colours red and yellow are bright primary colours, whereas linen suit is usually white and a Mercedes is usually associated with silver. In comparison, the colours used to describe the rich are more subdued than the colours used to describe the poor. Again, a very interesting idea and response. Now, to actually be able to do this for all the poems, you've really got to look at a load of videos and obviously a load of tutorial notes, and just really think about how can I twist this in a relatively believable way. So obviously, a lot of people argue that that's just not right, what he's actually saying there, but obviously it's powerfully put, and it's also justified. Remember, poetry and English in general actually is all about what you can justify. Perhaps Lawrence Ferlinghetti is subtly suggesting the poor lead more vibrant, lively lives, hence giving them the upper hand. The idea is reinforced by the fact that because of the height of the garbage men in comparison to the Mercedes, the poor men are looking down into the Mercedes. If this is interpreted in another sense, it could mean that the poor do not favour the life of the rich, lifestyles of the rich. They are unattractive, and their height gives them an authority. The rich is described as odorless, and their country wouldn't be odorless if it wasn't for the work of the garbage men. So it appears that maybe the rich need the poor more than the poor need the rich. Well, that's really taking it again, as you can probably see yourself, into quite a further analysis than what you'd normally expect. The fact the poor man is described as having grey iron hair is also effective because it suggests age has not made him frail but strong, and the woman so casually coiffed is an oxymoron, suggesting that the rich are very superficial. Their appearances are fake, so perhaps their lives are not as glamorous as we imagine them to be, which is again very interestingly put. And they've actually cut their last line there, and they've actually ended. So conclusion's actually not forthcoming there because they've done so much double, triple, deeper analysis in what they're actually trying to do. So that got 27 out of 27, which isn't really a surprise. It's really inventive, a lot of great original ideas, very concise, they didn't waste any words telling you about the background of the writer, what they were trying to do, etc. in terms of their life story. It was just all pointing to you as like all referencing the question with regards to the language and layout and the effect that it ultimately has on us. So the structure that you see there isn't the way that you actually have to follow it. You can do several different kinds of structure, but the important thing is to get all those elements of smile in and to constantly and consistently be cross-referencing the poems.